to Dexter Lawrence, though. All right, moving on to the next game. And this one is actually pretty amazing. And that is the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings facing off in J.J. McCarthy's first start back from his injury. And the Vikings take the win 27-24 in this game. I noticed in this game, Brian Flores with the Vikings defense, they've had some injuries, but they're getting healthier, and this Jared Goff-led Lions offense was looking pretty unstoppable with him and Gibbs, and it seemed like the coaches were replaced well, but especially early on in this game, this Brian Flores defense got a ton of pressure on Jared Goff, and he was like kind of a statue in there, and people were giving me a lot of heat for not having him in my top 10 quarterbacks list in the Baker Mayfield video. And I say, listen, I mean, if I'm going to have this type of criticism of him and of Jalen Hurts, I got to share it with Goff. But Jalen Hurts has actually won a Super Bowl. So that's why I give him that lead over Jared Goff, because I feel like even if Hurts has a bad game, he has still shown us that he will put it together and perform at his best when it matters most. Goff did do that in his first year, or in the first playoff run with against the Niners. That was a good effort. But even then, I remember watching that game with Dan and thinking about, man, he can't extend the play for them. He can't extend out of Ben Johnson's play calling. And this is the Lions' biggest kryptonite, in my opinion, is when you can get pressure on Jared Goff. So the Vikings take an early lead, and they're able to pull this one out. Dan, what were your thoughts on this game? I mean, this is a pretty meaningful loss in terms of how we view the top teams in the NFL.
And that's kind of how we talked about it beforehand when we were talking about the predictions coming into this week. Is like, what's the North really going to look like? What's the statement going to be in these two games coming up? I know we talked about the Eagles playing against the Packers and the Lions, but we also talked about what are the Lions going to look like to make that statement. And this is one of your statement games that you mentioned beforehand.
Yeah.
And it's like you're having a hard time beating, or you couldn't beat J.J. McCarthy. Jameer Gibbs got shut down. Like, all these players, like J-Mo got finally his release this week. But all these players that are like this team in general, like when you play somebody like the Rams, like the Eagles, and all these other NFC playoff teams that you're going to see coming up, then it's like, are you going to be able to compete? Because in reality, it's like we were just talked about beforehand, the NFC powerhouses being the Lions, the Eagles, the Rams. But to fall in a situation like this kind of gives that mojo to the Vikings to go to the playoffs, and like it makes me a little nervous for what the Lions might be able to do. Playoffs are still a ways away. But I was just completely shocked. Smart Shot 586, what's going on, man? How are you? What's it called? Just overall shocked. Completely threw me off. But it also showed that they stopped Gibbs and Goff, and it was like the whole offense couldn't do
Anything.
jack.
I mean,
there was but there was also no adjustment too. That was the thing that kind of threw me off, like how coaches, offensive coordinators are able to adjust on the fly when things are needed, and that really shows what's the really great teams compared to the good teams. But this wasn't like that.
Yeah, and I think in this game, one key stat: Lions on third down, 5 of 17. Where the Vikings, they weren't that much better. They were 4 of 12 though, and they had a lot of big plays that got them in scoring position. And J.J. McCarthy was getting outside the pocket. I'm not saying he was better than Jared Goff, but it's just like it brought that element to their offense to kind of escape some of that pressure. I mean, 5 of 17 is pretty bad on third down. It really highlights the amount of pressure they were getting on him. And I agree with you, Dan. This is a statement win for this Vikings team that with McCarthy, they can be like the Lions were 3-3 on fourth down, though. I should mention that. But that the Vikings can be a very competitive team if they have just solid quarterback play, because they have a great defensive coordinator in Brian Flores. And obviously Kevin O'Connell has done a great job with the offense year in and year out. And look at how they handled this Lions team in situational football. The Lions were 1 for 3 in the red zone, so they were not converting for many touchdowns. They had to get it from explosive plays. The Lions had 10 penalties for 76 yards, setting them back on a lot of those third downs. And then when it came to sacks, the Lions were sacked 5 times, and so were the Vikings. But they were able to match that pressure against that Lions offensive line, which is, like we said, the key to beating and competing with this Lions team. Which, we talk about the Eagles being able to do that. The Vikings aren't really a team that I would have put up there to be able to do that. So I'm very surprised. The NFC North at this point, Vikings are 4-4, so they're in fourth place. But Bears are 5-3, Lions are 5-3, the Packers are 5-2-1. And there's a lot they have to work on. I think it's not showing the division record, but either way, they're right there. They're a game behind being in second place and a half game behind first. So this Vikings team is totally back. This Bears team just looks kind of unsustainable. We'll get into that. And the